There are people who say, sorry, so often that it becomes almost invisible. They apologize when someone bumps into them. They apologize for asking a question. They apologize for needing help. They apologize for taking up space, expressing an opinion, feeling tired, speaking too much, speaking too little, arriving early, arriving late, and sometimes simply for existing in a room. To the outside world, it can look like politeness, good manners, consideration, but beneath the surface, something much deeper is often happening, because most people apologize when they believe they have done something wrong. These people apologize when they believe they might become a problem, and those are not the same thing. Somewhere in childhood, many chronic apologizers learned a painful lesson. They learned that safety was connected to managing other people's emotions. Maybe they grew up around unpredictable anger. Maybe love felt conditional. Maybe mistakes were met with criticism instead of understanding. Maybe they were praised for being the easy child, the quiet child, the child who never caused trouble. Over time, their nervous system adapted, not because something was wrong with them, because adaptation is what human beings do. A child cannot control the environment they live in, but they can learn to monitor it. They can learn to read facial expressions. They can learn to anticipate tension. They can learn to soften themselves before conflict arrives. And eventually, sorry becomes more than a word. It becomes an emotional blanket, something they wrap around themselves whenever uncertainty appears. Not because they are guilty, because they are trying to stay safe. When this pattern forms early enough, it begins operating on autopilot. The person no longer consciously decides to apologize. The apology arrives before the thought. Someone looks disappointed. Sorry. Someone seems upset. Sorry. A conversation becomes awkward. Sorry. The nervous system reacts first. The mind catches up later. This is why many chronic apologizers feel confused when people tell them, you don't need to apologize. Logically, they understand. Emotionally, something else is happening. The apology was never really about responsibility. It was about protection. It was an attempt to prevent rejection before rejection could happen. An attempt to calm tension before tension could grow. An attempt to reassure others that they are not a burden. And perhaps the saddest part is that many people who apologize constantly don't even realize how much weight they are carrying, because they've carried it for so long. It feels normal, like walking through a familiar room they've lived in their entire lives. They know every corner, every shadow, every creaking floorboard. Even if the room makes them small, it still feels familiar. As they move into adolescence, this habit often becomes more sophisticated. The child who once apologized to avoid punishment becomes the teenager who apologizes to avoid boy disapproval. They become highly aware of other people's moods, highly sensitive to shifts in tone. They replay conversations for hours, wondering if they offended someone, wondering if they asked for too much, wondering if they somehow made another person's day harder. The apology becomes an invisible anchor. It keeps them connected to others, but it also keeps them from fully standing in their own worth, because every unnecessary apology carries a hidden message. The message is not spoken aloud, but the nervous system hears it. I might be a problem. I might be too much. I might not deserve this space. And when those messages repeat for years, they slowly shape self-perception, not dramatically, quietly, the way water shapes stone, one apology at a time. Then adulthood arrives, and the pattern often follows. In relationships, they become the first to apologize after conflict, even when they were hurt, even when they were misunderstood, even when they were the ones who deserved an apology. At work, they soften every request, every boundary, every opinion, as if their needs require permission, as if their existence needs constant justification. And because they are often deeply empathetic people, others rarely notice the cost. They see kindness, patience, thoughtfulness. What they don't see is the exhaustion underneath, the constant monitoring, the invisible calculation, the lifelong effort to ensure everyone else feels comfortable, even at their own expense. But here is the deeper truth. The constant apology was never evidence of weakness. It was evidence of adaptation, a survival response that became so successful it outlived the circumstances that created it. And once you see that, something shifts. Because the story is no longer about a person who apologizes too much. The story is about a child who became extraordinarily skilled at preserving connection. A child who learned to read emotional weather better than most people ever will. A child who developed sensitivity not as a luxury, but as a necessity. The apology was never the wound. The apology was the bandage. And that changes everything. Suddenly, the behavior looks different, not annoying, not irrational, not broken. It becomes understandable, even compassionate, because every automatic sorry carries the echo of an older fear. A fear that once made perfect sense. A fear that once protected something precious. The desire to belong. The desire to be loved. The desire to have a home inside another person's acceptance. And perhaps that is why these individuals often struggle to recognize their own strength. They spend so much time minimizing themselves that they rarely notice what their behavior reveals. The immense emotional intelligence, the awareness, the capacity for empathy, the ability to sense what others feel, traits that were forged in difficult conditions, traits that helped them survive. What looks like excessive apologizing is often the visible surface of a much deeper story. A story about adaptation. A story about connection. A story about a nervous system that learned to choose peace whenever possible. And beneath every unnecessary apology is often someone who spent years believing that making themselves smaller would make relationships safer. Yet even after all these years, that child is still there. Still trying, still protecting, still offering sorry like a key that might unlock belonging, not because they are weak, not because they lack confidence, but because once upon a time, that strategy worked. It helped them find safety in a world that sometimes felt uncertain. And if you recognize yourself in this pattern, there is nothing shameful about it. Your mind learned what it needed to learn. Your heart carried what it needed to carry. The habit may tell a story of pain, but it also tells a story of resilience, of adaptation, of survival, because long before it became a reflex, that apology was a way of finding your place in the world. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is this: you are not the word sorry. You are the person who learned to use it, the person beneath it, the person who was always worthy of care, worthy of understanding, and worthy of belonging. Not because you never caused problems, not because you kept everyone happy, not because you apologized first, but simply because you were always enough, even before the apology.